What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Through the Void Gate. This is episode 21. I'm joined today by Justin
Howdy.
and Spencer.
Hey.
And we are here because Justin got to go to the Bokur Brawl and actually play in a live Warcaster event.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, you want to run down for us what that experience was like?
Sure. So first of all, the brawl overall. It was a really great run event. Seth and Steve, they really knocked it out of the park. It's done in a VFW hall, but it had a lot of tables. The terrain was top notch. There was a lot of energy in the room for all the games going on. They had a lot of War Machine going on. They had Brawl Machine going on. They had a lot of stuff going on that day, and it was like every day you had free lunch. There was freebies for everybody. I know for Warcaster you got activation tokens, you got focus tokens, you got 2 red dice of the power dice, and I know I brought little gift bags full of objective markers, objective scoring zones, and some widgets. So there was, just for coming to the event, you got a decent amount.
Justin can't help himself. He's a 3D printing whore.
I am, but I mean, I think they add so much to the game, and just when you have like those scoring zones, it just adds so much clarity that like I think it adds enough to where it was worth it for everybody, especially when you're trying to run the first War Machine event or Warcaster event, and it's you don't want people being like, well, am I in? Am I out? Like it's so much easier when you can just measure to this point.
I think they're very cool. I just know how much you love your 3D printer, so.
Yeah. But big shout out to Seth and Steve. They were awesome. They ran all the events all day. It was just them for judging, and I don't think anybody had to wait an exceptionally long amount of time for a judge call or anything. And I had to say, with as many judge calls as they got, like I know there'd be a point where I'd be a little bit annoyed. They did not seem annoyed at all. They were superstars. I don't know how they have the energy for it every day, but they really did a great job. It was a really nice event.
Do you know what the most frequently asked judge questions were, just offhand?
For Warcaster, there were a couple of them that were a little interesting. I think most of them happened at the Empyrean's table.
Big shock.
One in particular was, can the factotum heal itself? And yes, it can. And what was the other? There were a few like little weird rulebook things, and most of them were pretty straightforward. I know there was the whole question about, can I put another system failure on somebody, to override that one and try and get a reroll at it. Of course, that one's also a no because the example in the book specifically brings that one up. But I don't even think there were a lot of like in War Machine. I think the most common rules question or the most common judge call is, hey, is this in or is this out? Like it's just to make sure that there's a third party measuring something.
Yeah.
That's at least my experience with War Machine is, hey, this is like so close that I don't want to say one way or the other, and this is game changing. I don't even think there was a whole lot of that on the Warcaster tables, and honestly, I think the people on the Warcaster tables were pretty chill for the most part. Like, most of the time, if something was really close in a game versus me, I was pretty happy to say, hey, that's in, or vice versa. The other person was like, yeah, just go for it. If it looked like it was pretty reasonable, because trying to measure like diagonal through a building and stuff was really awkward. Most people were pretty cool to say, yeah.
So I'm sure they know all the rules. This isn't anything against them, but did they ever have to come to you for any like veteran game knowledge?
They did lean on me a little bit on some of this, which is fine. I know Seth at the very beginning was like, hey, if we're leaning on you too much, let us know. We can tone it back. But I know early on I kind of did expect I did wait for them to come up to tables for judge calls and stuff. But as it went along, like sometimes they would refer to me and ask, and so more often than not, I would generally try and give people an answer. If I overheard them asking each other a question, or if
just I
heard them calling the judge. just to try and save them, because like I say, Steve and Seth, they had so many tables to worry about. Because the Bokur Big Brace Brawl was pretty full. Then they had the Last Chance qualifier going on at the same time, and a Brawl Machine tournament at the same time, and a Warcaster tournament. They had 4 tournaments going on with 2 TOs.
Yeah, that's a little
that's a
hectic.
lot. That's a lot. And,
Good for them.
They killed it. They killed it. They did a great job. Like I say, I don't think I saw anybody sitting for a particularly long period of time waiting for a judge. So, considering it was just 2 of them, complete all-stars. So,
Good way to get your exercise on the weekend, that's for sure.
Those guys were moving constantly. So, speaking of the events that were going on, Friday we had the first event. There were 13 signed up, 4 never showed up. So we ended up with 9 people playing. And then the person that got the bye in the first round actually just dropped from the whole tournament because, make it an even 8. So it was an 8-man tournament on the first day. So that was pretty... I kind of wish that guy would have gotten to play. But 8 people makes things a little more smooth. And that was his reasoning for dropping. So that day, there were 8 players. There were 4 ISA players, 3 Marcher Worlds players, and then I played AC for both events because I was apparently the only AC player. And then the person that dropped was an ISA player. So the 8 were 3 Marcher Worlds, 3 ISA, then 1 IMPS, 1 AC. So what I brought to the events, I played AC in both of them, spoilers. And I brought the same list in both of them. And I didn't really mess too much with sideboard options or the special issue options. So my list ended up being a Scythe, 2 Scourges. They both had Hollow Phage cannons. One had a rocket pod, and one had a Force Rod. 2 Marauders, 2 Weavers, 1 squad of the melee boys, the Reavers, and Jack's Redblade. And then, of course, I only had 1 Mantlet, so 1 Mantlet. Now, if I wasn't flying on an airplane, I would have brought my spindly, crazy Nemesis, and I probably would have brought my second Scythe, because the boards, they were actually pretty well spaced out for terrain. Like, I felt like they had a good amount of terrain, but they were also spaced out enough to where I didn't feel like I was ever punished for bringing a Scythe. So it allowed me to actually try and push the Scythe to its limit. And in some games that really did a lot for me, and in other games it really did nothing for me. So we'll see. But on my actual tournament list for my sideboard, I did list an extra Weaver, an extra Scourge, and Raxus. And my squad wasn't in my main list. It was actually one of my sideboard options that was just technically always in. So yeah. So the
what
first
turned
day,
out to be your MVP for the day?
It was game by game, but like some games, the Scythe was just outrageous. It was seriously ludicrous how good the Scythe was in some games, and then in other games, it was just sad how bad it was.
I mean, that tracks with Scythes. They tend to be very feast or famine models.
Yeah. The Scourges really did very little for me throughout the entire tournament. I almost never even activated a Scourge.
That's not surprising. You hate Scourges.
I do hate Scourges. Marauders did very little for me overall. My Weavers, as always, in AC, the Weavers are the all. The Furies were just insane.
How'd you feel
actually,
about Jax?
What?
I said, how'd you feel about Jax all tournament? Because that's
okay.
That's an off-meta choice right there.
Jax in like 2 games, she was unkillable, right? Because Def 5 with a reroll is just insane. And then in other games, she died like a punk. She was all over the place. Actually, I will say, I'll go over it at the end, but the models that surprised me the most were the Reapers, because I'm so used to playing with my heavies and like starting turn 1 with just a Nemesis and a Weaver on the board. So my turn 1 is very, very like standardized when we're playing on TTS, right?
Yeah.
Well, because I didn't bring a Nemesis, it was very like, what do I do now? So most of my games it started off with the reavers with a raker attached to them, and my first couple games I had 2 weavers out because I was trying to just press that hey, you can't hide from my first turn fury thing, and I kind of gave up on that as the tournament went on, because one thing I'll say is, like, most of these people, they said that they didn't have that many games, but they were well aware of the well aware of being able to hide away from AC weavers. They they definitely respected the turn 1 shenanigans I could do.
You learn that quickly if you've played against AC at all. You very
So,
quickly.
I would say, I think they were telling me the most experienced player I talked to had probably like 10 to 15 games outside of that tournament.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not like a ton.
That's not a ton at all.
So you had more games than the entire rest of the tournament collectively.
Right. and that's just the people I talked to. Like, there might be other people that I didn't catch, and they had more games on the outside. But the ones I kept talking to, they had very few games. So we'll start off by going into day 1. Day 1, we started off by playing against ISA. It was a nice guy named Philip. He was super cool, super chill. He played ISA, and one thing I'm gonna just spoilers now. I played the same 3 people in the same order both days. I don't know how that even happens, but I guess it's only 8 people in the whole tournament, so
I wonder
it's
if it's like a name-based generation or something.
I think he was using PG Swiss for Warcaster, and I don't know if PG Swiss does something along those lines. But Philip, in particular, I ended up playing on the same board both days.
Did they not change the board in between days at all?
Well, they had like 6 boards set up for terrain, and then you would change out the objectives and the terrain as needed for the different missions.
Mm-hmm.
And it just happened like table 1 on the first day, table 1 on the second day. It was me and him.
Gotcha.
One thing about Philip is that he starts with a like both games that we played. This is yet again spoilers for day 2. He started off with a Morningstar and Mira for start every time, and I will say he played his Mira definitely different than I've seen people play her. Because like in full size, you see her kind of hang out towards the end of the board and kind of stay there because she really can't make it beyond the end of the board. But he played her like flat behind a building. Like, I kept forgetting she even existed most of the time because I never actually saw her model for most of the game.
She was just kind of there for a charging effect.
But you know what? On Skirmish, her effect was actually pretty huge. She charged like half the board, right? Because 5 inches up and then 10 inches up is to the midpoint of the board.
Yeah, that seems real good.
So she actually did get to just sit there with an arc and keep charging like half of his force every single turn.
Yeah, that's how I've seen a lot of people play Issa nowadays.
Yeah. I've seen Asa played that way because Asa, like, she provides game-breaking rules, but if she dies to a stiff breeze, so you kind of have to play her like that. Mira, I'm kind of used to her like sitting on a point. Hey, I'm gonna always have cover. I'm gonna do these things, but I'm gonna actually be contributing. And he played her kind of like, I think personally for me, too reserve. Like, one thing I always tend to do whenever I put out anything is just make sure that it's 1 movement away from an objective. And
you also play very aggressive.
Yeah, I do play very aggressive.
Typically speaking, you always play very aggressive. So
you have to in Warcaster.
You have to with AC. Otherwise, you'll just lose all your pieces and not get anything back for it. But it was boiling point. It was a very good game. He came up. He did the normal Morningstar Gatecrasher thing. It was a very back and forth game. And then like he started trying to pressure my point at one point, and I ended up summoning like a scythe, and then I had like, it was a 4-arc gate, and I had 1 extra arc on there and no spot to put any models, and I was like, well, thank God mantlets aren't on bases. And I like put a mantlet, just put it down. Like, I didn't even really think too much about it. I was like, oh well, I can put it to where it's like less than an inch from this wall, right? So models kind of need to be able to clear that wall and stuff to get through there. I'm gonna tell you what, this mantlet single-handedly like won me the game because because enemy models can't pass through the mantlet, that mantlet cock-blocked him off of that objective. Between the wall, that mantlet, and other models, he just could not interact with that objective for half the game. And it got to the point where he was so frustrated at that mantlet that he ended up sending like a morning star at it, right? Just to punch the mantlet down, and the mantlet survived. I was so dumbstruck. Like, I've never actually, like, I texted Sneaky after that game, and I was like, I actually had a mantlet do something.
And my response was, for you, not your opponent?
Every time I put out a mantlet, I regret it because it gives your opponents cover too. And I always just like I just need to get this arc off, and I get the arc off, but then like my opponent's getting cover for something later on in the game that's important. This game, the mantlet was all work, no play, did its work. That mantlet was a hero, and I'm
sorry he did that to you, Philip.
You know what? I'm gonna say that this tournament, just not using some of my comfort picks like the Nemesis and not having and having the mantlet without the base, and being forced to like when I start off with my unit every time I was seeing like a lot of new combinations I've never really seen with them before. So it was kind of nice too. Like I kind of got like that new experience because. I mean, you guys know, how often do I actually even put a Reaver squad on the board?
Yeah. Like
They're
never.
usually just part of my list, and they almost never see the board.
So, did you learn anything unexpected about the faction, considering you kind of shuffled up the way you play?
I definitely have a new respect for Reavers. And I definitely have a new respect for what mantlets can do. Now, this game was also the only one where the mantlet actually did anything. Otherwise, the mantlet was still just kind of what I expected out of mantlets. But this game in particular, let me see that mantlets could do some pretty silly things if you give them the chance.
Okay. And we're saying we're we're happy they weren't on bases because that allowed you to position the mantlet where you wouldn't otherwise.
Right. Because if I had the mantlet on a base, like if they came with bases. By the way, this is coming up because there's been a huge set of arguments in the community about whether mantlets should be on bases or not. That's why I'm mentioning the whole base argument and everything. Because I put my gate just outside of the objective scoring zone, and so once I put my scythe on the other side, and there was the wall that was within an inch of to where I couldn't place anything else, and there was the scoring zone. And then there was another model. I physically couldn't fit anything else in there but a mantlet. So it just kind of became this the weirdly perfect spot for it to just be the biggest pain in the ass. So nice. I ended up winning that game with 13 points, and I'm actually kind of kicking myself now. I did not write down what my opponents had. But I don't remember that game being like a throwaway game. I left them way in the dust or anything. That game, it was a very tight game, very good. That was on Boiling Point. Game number 2 was on Moon Shadow. I played against Dan, who had, I'm just gonna say, he had the best sweater I've ever seen. You remember those old play school rugs that had the streets on it and the houses and cars and everything?
Yes.
Yeah. He had one of those in sweater format.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. So the mission was Moon Shadow. And this Dan, one of the things that he came to the Bokur Brawl to do was to see if this was a game he wanted to promote in his local area. He plays in Maryland. So I hope I gave him the best Bokur Brawl experience he could get. Very nice guy. He played ISA also, so both my days were ISA, and Marcher Worlds. And one of the things he was telling me was because he's considering playing this game in his meta and trying to promote it, he's like, hey, I want you to show me some of the craziest things you can do in the game. And I was like, okay, because whatever, I'll give you what you want.
He needed the sneaky experience. These are the people I
wanted the good spoon experience, I think.
Yeah.
So Moon Shadow. One of the things that's interesting about Moon Shadow is until you set that map up, you don't realize how close the objectives are to each other, because the picture in the rule book is not the scale.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was. I'm trying to remember how the terrain was, but the terrain was to where I could, because I'm starting off with the Reavers every time in this tournament. I was actually able to do some pretty egregious stuff with them. Like, so on that particular game, one of the standout moments was first. I moved up, or I had to slip displacer, so they moved up. I moved a squad member up to somewhere because I would have had 6 inches before, so I'm at the 11-inch line. And then I get to move a squad member up. I'm at that'd be the 17-inch line. And then his objective on his side is like at the math is hard.
Well, you'd be at the 20-inch line.
Well, the 20.
Oh no. Yeah. The 20-inch.
No, I'd be at the 17. So I'm still somewhere between the 2 points on the far side. And I can place one of my guys on the point on the right side. Because if people that aren't familiar with Moonshadow is like a diamond. One of the objective zones is like an inch outside of your deployment zone. Same with the opponent, and then on the sides in the midpoint. So the interesting thing is the way the vassals work with the slip displacer, I was able to score both his objective and the objective on the right and my home objective on the first turn.
So
because the way the raker moves. So because the squad slip displacers up, moves up, I put the raker close to his thing, and then the raker spikes to get his movement and gets on that point. It felt really egregious a little bit. And I've never felt that way about vassals in my entire life. But it felt pretty gross being able to score all 3 on the first turn, and then you just have 2 turns where you have to get only one objective.
Yeah,
so
that's quite the first turn swing.
Yeah, I mean you come out of it just lets you relax a little bit for the rest of the first pulse round and focus on getting things more centrally located than having to be oh, I need to be over here, I need to be over here, I need to be over here. You can be oh, well, I just need to be here. But I'll have some stuff over here later, I guess.
It's also super deflating from a morale standpoint.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's also that's a terrain thing, because that's why whenever I'm designing maps, I'm always trying to make sure that squads can't do that, can't score 2 at once. So it's definitely mitigatable if you want to. I don't like it being that way.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, because in that particular map, I'm looking at a picture I have of it now. It actually ended up being the middle of the board only had a very small piece of terrain in it. So it wasn't I had to do a whole lot of jiggling to get around the big center point. So, and I mean, that's one of the things about the maps of the Bokur. They were very, very varied. I guess but some had a big terrain piece in the middle, some had nothing. Or, like I say, this was basically a soda can sitting in the middle, that size. So you had, like I said, you had some of them where it was meant to be a Royal Rumble in the middle, and some of them where it was more meant to be on the outsides. So, and we played the game out. It was pretty good. Moonshadow, I love Moonshadow. It has you thinking about things a lot more. Oh, I want to be within 5 inches of this thing because I don't want to have my rat reduced. Or, oh, I can actually stand on this point because the objectives are not terrain features and don't provide cover. I think Moonshadow is one of those maps that just gives you a lot more to think about every turn, and I love it.
That wasn't how you felt the first time you played on it.
I know. The very first time I played on it, I was very mad about that map. That might have also been your your map that you made for it, because the map that you made for it basically had this 10-inch cloud in the middle. So ridiculous.
I think the first map we played on was the one that had the 4 clouds on each point. Not the big one in the middle. Yeah, that one was a terrible map. I should delete that one off of DTS because that's a bad map.
It was, I don't know. It was super tilting, and it was even worse to play against Empyreans. Because Empyreans are well, I don't care about any of these rules with their phase projectile cannons. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned in game 1, stealth was relevant for an entire 1 turn.
Hey, sometimes that's all it takes sometimes.
Well, it was relevant on the first turn, and that was it.
Oh, okay.
Because like I put my squad on my point, and I just said, well, I guess they're not going to spike their arc off because your Morningstar can't shoot me first turn now. Okay. It was one of those like, I'm not sure how relevant it actually was, but it did make it to where he couldn't make an attack on me, so I guess it was impactful.
Yeah.
So that game it was really good. I ended up winning that one by 24 points. This whole day, like, but I had models on the board at the end of the game, which was impressive for me because I'm not used to playing like that with AC.
Mm-hmm.
Then we went on to round 3.
Yeah.
This was against Kevin.
Well,
He was.
I just want to mention. I just want to mention, like, 24 on Moon Shadow versus the 12 or whatever on Boiling Point. Like, it sounds huge, but there's an extra point on Moon Shadow, and it's a escalating objective.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3. So like it's not weird for it to be that high of a score.
Well, and here's the thing: Moon Shadow 24 is your max, because it's 4 points. 4 times 3 is 12. Times 2 is 8, and times 4 is 4, so that's 24. The maximum of Boiling Point was 18, and the last mission we ended up playing for the day because they did the pendulum packet verbatim on the first day because it was round 3 or 3 rounds and there was only 3 missions.
Mm-hmm.
Now I will say there was a little bit going on between round 2 and round 3 because the guy dropped round 1, right, so that we would have a nice even tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Something happened in PG Swiss to where the guy didn't get dropped. I don't know exactly what happened, but we got to this round 3 and had 3 undefeateds. Because I didn't even realize it till afterwards. The guy I played in round 2, he had lost his first game, and so it really made for an awkward situation where everybody was like, we're gonna get out in 3 rounds and it'll be perfect." And the guy was like, and then we found out there were 3 undefeateds going into the final round. So the undefeateds were the 1 AC, the 1 Empyreans, and the 1 Marcher Worlds. Or, well, there were a lot of Marcher Worlds, but a Marcher Worlds player. So it was kind of interesting. The Empyreans player ended up getting matched against my friend from back home who brought ISA that he had just been painting. And this is
Pat?
Pat.
Nice.
Pat. CT Paintworks.
Paddy Wagon.
He that's what people might recognize him as. And he was up against the Empyreans, and he's like, "Justin, I've never played against Empyreans." I was like, "Just win, so we don't have a 4th round."
Just do your best. Look, this isn't going to be a good time. Look,
Spoilers,
this isn't going to be a good time for you.
He
What?
won that game.
Yeah, Pat. Let's go.
Yeah, get it, Pat.
Pat was the hero of the day. He made it. He fixed the pairing problem.
Pat, the hero we need.
From what I understand, there was a situation in his game where the Empyrean player used the kinetic accelerator, came up and did 2 points of damage when he did attacks on 5 different things, right? And
he had a Josh moment.
What?
Said he had a Josh moment.
Well, he wasn't running a second phase projectile, and that bit him. Anyways, but then Pat, the next turn, apparently did a kinetic accelerator on his firebrand and just killed everything that it got here.
Yeah.
So,
as firebrands do.
Yeah, firebrands, man, they do me proud.
Shield never fails.
But actually, one interesting thing about my round 1 opponent's build is that all of his firebrands were double shields.
Interesting.
So there were some slight shakeups in builds that I saw throughout the event. The Morningstars were pretty similar, although I think all of them were running Maelstroms instead of my personal favorite, the Immolator. But even though I understand Maelstroms are probably the optimal pick, I just like the Immolators.
Mm-hmm.
But then round 3 was on Apotheosis. It was me versus Kevin and his Marcher Worlds. And after playing Josh as many times with his Marcher Worlds, like AC into Marcher Worlds, my stomach gets a little sick every time.
I trained you for this.
Now his Strike Raptor was not built the way I'm used to seeing Strike Raptors built. His only had one Rockbuster. It had a Vortex missile, the Cyclone cannons, and what was the other weapon? A slug gun? No. It had another gun on its arm. I'm trying to remember which one it was.
It could be anything.
It's not super relevant. He only had one melee weapon, which was big.
Yeah. I would assume it's a 2-point arm weapon, which I don't even know. A flamethrower, maybe?
Oh, he had a flamethrower. That's right.
That makes sense.
Math checks out. But I mean, it's still a Strike Raptor with an Engineer on turn 1, and it still did Strike Raptor with Engineer on turn 1 things.
Mm-hmm.
So we're playing on Apotheosis agenda, and it was a real back and forth game. Like it played like typical AC into Marcher Worlds, where like, I would put things on the board, he would just destroy them. But there were some kind of like standout things in that game, right? Like, because the game came down to like the last like turn or two. Like I needed to kill some things to score some points, and I just couldn't do it. But some cool things that happened in that game was I got the continuous effect hat trick on the Strike Raptor. So what that means is that Strike Raptor couldn't use his melee weapon. He was corroded. He was on fire, and he was locked down.
And it wasn't dead.
And it was not dead. Yes. Just so everybody knows how you can get all of those effects in AC. A Raker bit him for the lockdown. A Marauder came up and whacked him with his melee weapon for the continuous the system failure. I don't remember whether a Scourge shot him with a Holophage or a Scythe shot him with a Holophage for the corrosion, but it might have also been the Atrophic Decomposer Cypher. Also could have been King Remain. I don't know. There's a lot of ways I can get corrosion in AC.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was Pyrokinetic Surge from a Weaver to get the fire on. So like it was a team effort to get this on there.
Wasn't like Sentinel shot him with 2 weapons.
Yeah, it was not that easy. Sentinel shoots him with 2 weapons, and then a Factotum walks up and hits him. No, this was a full team effort to hurt the Strike Raptor. My Scythe, I felt like throughout the rest of the other parts of the day, my Scythe had been pretty average. He would do a scything run and kill a couple things. He would, maybe hit a Holophage shot. Like this particular game, I swear that Scythe made at least 15 attacks and only did 2 points of damage.
I see. You rolled like you were playing me.
Yeah, it was so bad. One of the big parts of that was I wanted the Scythe. There was like a really narrow alleyway to one of the objectives, and I used the Scythe to try and clear off some infiltrators on there. Like I think it was 2 infiltrators on there that I needed to clear off, and I could run over both of them. So I have 5 attacks into two Marcher Worlds infiltrators, and I failed to kill either one of them. And even worse than that, now my Scythe is actually like blocking any other part of my army from trying to score this point. That was one of the things that kind of sealed the game.
So
But
you got to spike with them Reavers, baby.
But that was the second scything run that those guys had lived through. There was both games, like his engineer was just unkillable. I don't know why I cannot kill engineers, but if you can repair things, I just cannot kill you. Factotums and engineers, case in point, I cannot kill you. You are not dying when I target you because I just can't do it.
I never understood how you had so much trouble with engineers.
I don't
Me neither,
know why.
but I loved it.
I can kill some things like nobody's business. And then engineers, just for some reason, I cannot do it.
It's like they're not difficult to kill models, but you struggle with
I know.
consistently.
The engineer in this game, I think I had 4 turns of a Marauder just putting everything into him and not being able to do it.
That doesn't surprise me, considering I've
This
seen
might
you
have
put a
also
full heavy
this
into
was
it.
also the game where I would shoot at, like, my Marauder would try and shoot at the engineer, not do anything to the engineer, strafe into Fiddles, and do a point of damage to Fiddle. Like, it was so dumb. Like, I accidentally killed Fiddles throughout that game, and I could not kill this stupid Marauder, or this engineer, or the infiltrators. If I could have killed the engineer or the infiltrators, I think I could have pulled this game out, but I just couldn't. So, yeah. And then there was even a situation later on in the game where he had a Marcher Worlds Weaver in a spot to where he could barely see my Scourge around a building. So I had cover. I run Misanthropes on my Scourges. So I'm defense 6 with cover to a Marcher Worlds Weaver that's just throwing off a random cryo lock at me with like two Arc in the Well, and he gets it. I'm like, I just couldn't catch a break that game. But and not to take anything away from Kevin, he played great. But like, I just felt like the dice would not turn my way that game. I was like, please, I have 5 attacks and the 2 little 1 wound dudes with a pow, like the scythe. Like, please just let them die. It would not happen. It was just my heart was broken at the end of that game. Yeah. I ended up scoring 14 in that game, and I think he was at like 16 or 18. I think it ended up being like he was at 18 because I think there were 2 points of failure on my part. So like I had planned on scoring 2 more objectives than I did, and yeah, that was the decider for the game. It was a knockout beat 'em up game. It was really good. And Kevin played a great game. I don't want to take anything from him. Congratulations to Kevin for winning the first Warcaster event. But that
Marcher Worlds.
It was a wild game. I just remember being so frustrated every time because it would be like I'd roll my scythe over like a million things, do like 2 points of damage, and then he'd hit me by like 1 with a POW 3 weapon on an armor 4 thing and just do a point of damage to it. I'm like, why?
So I find myself conflicted. I'm sad you lost, but I'm also very pumped that the first event was taken by Marcher Worlds. So I'm not sure what to do with that information.
Listen, as much as I enjoy my Empyreans, I'm totally on Pat. Yeah, Pat. I have no confliction there.
Yeah, and then like I say, Pat winning his game let Kevin like not have to play a 4th round to seal the deal. So that was good. The event ended at a good time. One interesting thing is that I think we did have a couple clock outs, and they were playing the 1 hour clock. So, I think I was getting down to around like 15 minutes on my clock in general on games. And I wasn't particularly rushing. I don't feel like. I feel like I was playing very, very casually and very calmly, and measuring out things and taking my time with my turns. And I was.
But you also have a lot more experience,
right? But what I'm saying is like, I think that experience level will make it to where, the clocks can come down to like 45 minutes, and then then I'm going to be playing like faster. But with hour-long clocks, it was a pretty soft clock time. So, do you guys have any more questions about day 1?
No. I mean, one thing I'm interested in is, since you played the same people in day 1 and day 2, did anybody switch up their lists between the 2 different days?
No, there were no list switch-ups that I noticed.
Did they make any adjustments in how they played you?
Not a ton. And I'll get to some of the things as we go through the day 2 stuff, because like I did play the exact same people in the exact same order. But the missions were different because they were just trying to play different missions. And the only missions left are, Chaos Theory, Spontaneous Combustion, and the one that we specifically said not to play. And they took that do not play that one to heart because they did not play that one.
Hey, look at us affecting meta.
So, day 2 started off with spontaneous combustion. For anybody listening, spontaneous combustion is the one where it's 3 points diagonally across the board, and they score the same every round, but they score based off of how close they are to your deployment zone. So if you score your opponents, it's worth 3 points. The center one is always worth 2, and the one closest to your deployment zone is worth 1. So I got Phil again, and I think anybody that's listened to us for any period of time understands how much I hate into pulse round scoring. And he won the roll off, and he said he wanted to go first. And maybe, I don't know, me personally, like I was like, hey, listen, I understand if you want to go first, that's fine. But I just want you to understand that this is very skewed for second player. Like, very skewed. And he thought about it, and we talked it out a little bit, and he did end up deciding to go second. So I want to apologize to Phil right now if I changed his decision at all and it made him feel like, he lost any kind of agency in that game. I personally feel like going second in those gives you all the agency. But, I don't think he had any hard feelings, but I was able to do some shenanigansy things with first. And me and Phil actually played on the same exact map that we played the last time. But one thing that had happened throughout the day was one of the big buildings had gotten turned sideways to where, he had, this 10-inch building across his deployment zone that he could just hide whatever he wanted behind it, right? So one thing I did was I didn't even worry about trying to do a Weaver at the beginning, right? Everybody seemed to understand what was going on with that. And I was just like, there's no sense in even going for it. I just did Marauder unit. And so what happened was, I think he still deployed very scared because I did deploy first. I did, I said, hey, place my stuff, go on. So then he placed like I still had a Weaver. And of course it was Mira again, right behind that central building. And then the Morning Star to where he could walk around and get on the point. Now he seemed to think that he couldn't get on the point. He was close. He was close enough by his measures that I'm like, listen, if your intent was to be on the point, just be on the point. I don't care. So he did.
We play a gentleman's game.
What?
We play like a gentleman's game.
Right. So he did make it to the point on his first turn, but just barely, right? Because, like I say, he was very cognizant of what Weavers could do, but he didn't even look up and see what I had deployed because he just expected the Weaver.
Well, if he was going first, he would have deployed first, so he would have.
Well, no. He ended up deciding to go second because I had convinced him
that
it was better.
All right, I missed that.
Okay. Yeah, that was
Jedi
why
mind tricked him into losing the game, basically.
He does that.
Yeah, future advice: don't trust Justin. He's super shady like that.
You guys are scum. Second player is so advantaged on that map. But so like I was mentioning his Mira placements, they kind of got him throughout the games, our games, because he would place Mira dead center to where he could get as many things in her bubble as he could, but he didn't actually have her to where she could get on a point ever. And an interesting thing about that building they had at that point was there was no ladders from that deployment zone. You had to either have flight or go all the way around that building.
Gross.
Yeah. And I think that might have also just been what tripped him up a little bit too. Because I wholeheartedly believe I gave him the best advice just to take second.
Could he not throw a void gate on top of it?
He could, and he did. But the building, it was it was infinity terrain, and they were so segmented with little walls and stuff that you couldn't really fit a ton in there.
Gotcha.
It was really awkward. There was one point where because he kept having to place gates off of there, and then at one point he put a siege breaker out from there, and I was like, well, that siege breaker is not making it to a point for 2 or 3 turns. One interesting thing about the terrain was that the infinity terrain also has those stairwells that run the side of a building.
Oh, I hate those. Yeah.
Yeah, I personally don't like those myself, but I mean they are terrain and they're usable and they're fine. But it made for some really awkward situations. So one of them was that, and it kind of like the stairway I think led away from the objective. Was kind of like what was going on with that. So I don't know. It led to some really, really strange situations.
Hashtag yellow jumps.
So one of the problems that he had though was that game he started off, he got his morning star on the point. I did my squad thing. I think I got slip displacer again. So I moved my squad to the center point, and then I put my raker like on the end of his point, right? And this was the map that it had kind of like a similar thing to where we did the finals the day before, where it had that little alleyway to where once I put my raker on the other side of that objective, his Morningstar actually couldn't make it out past the objective. And I forget his reasoning, but he had decided not to gate crash on his first turn. Because I specifically remember being like, "Hey, didn't you mean to gate crash?" He's like, "No, I really wanted to move. I want to move this Morningstar again." Okay, fine. So then when I put that raker just outside of the objective, it meant that his Morningstar was getting to move an inch because he didn't start off in melee range with me. So he had to move up, and he couldn't get past the objective. I mean, he could still take all of his attacks on my raker, and I think my raker did die. But it kind of meant that he lost a little bit of efficiency on his turns. But yeah, so I think between not gate crashing the first turn and Mira like not really helping him contribute to the long part of the game, it was that I think those shot him in the foot. And what it allowed me to do is he didn't end up getting into the center of the board on the first pulse round, and that let me just because like he had to summon things on top of a building that couldn't get to the center point, and it made the whole thing awkward for him. And Mira actually being able to charge things so much in ISA. And ISA having very limited ways to like remove all that arc that's sitting around made him very arc starved in like the mid part of the game. Like he wasn't able to place like 3 and 4 arc gates because he had all of his arc on things. So it did lead to some really awkward situations for him. So I ended up finishing Pulse round 1 because he didn't get to my objective or the center objective, and I was able to contest his objective. I was able to start Pulse round 1 up 3. And that was pretty big. I pretty much rode that until the end of the game. And the game was like a big back and forth. And like the pictures I have, it was just a mosh pit for the center, right? Like there were like 3 firebrands and marauders and scourges and everything just fighting over that center point, right? And then like it felt like super close and tough and nitty gritty until like the very last turn. I did just the most obscene, obnoxious scything run in the history of scything runs. I had a scythe go over. I think it killed like a weaver, a siege breaker, did 2 more damage to another siege breaker, killed 2 firebrands that were on 1 health, killed his Morningstar that was on 1 health, and I think I might have killed something else or maimed something else. Right? So like he suddenly going into the final turn of the game had like he lost like half of his assets, right? And then I finished my scything run. I had like nothing else in melee range. And I was like, well, I guess I'll take this long bomb shot at Mira from across the board because I could see her over the building. Or not Mira. He had Duchess in his list. I shot Duchess from across the map and just flat out killed her. And she was contesting. She was on my point, so she was going to score him 3 points. And then I spiked to get on his point. So like that scythe went from like it killed everything that didn't have an activation token on it, except for this Mira that I've been talking about, who couldn't get on a point. And then it killed all the contesting mobs too.
Hercules.
Yeah, it was a little obnoxious. Like it was crazy. Like I've not seen a scythe perform that ridiculously in a while. So then I ended up scoring 6 points at the end of that round because he couldn't get on any of the points, and I just killed everything. So, because like he would have had a chance to get on point. So even that, like if something had survived, it wouldn't have even mattered that I had such a good scything run. But between things not surviving and him not being able to activate anything, like I ended up scoring 6 and just taking the game from there.
Gross.
Yeah. So the next mission was Chaos Theory, and this is up against Dan again. And I same thing happened. I won the die roll, and I was like, listen, like I don't want. One of the things I don't want is people to walk away with a bad taste in their mouth about like the game, because of end of pulse round scoring. Because PP with making the missions in the Pendulum document the end of activation scoring ones, to me that shows that they understand that there's actually a problem with those. And Dan, without a ton of experience in the game, I said, hey, would you? I know I won the die roll. Would you like to go second? I think I might have offended him, and I apologize if I did, because he seemed to be a little bit upset. He's like, listen, I'm a grown man. I can take it. It's fine. He's like, just be like I said yesterday, be as mean as possible, you know. And so I was. It was on Chaos Theory, which people that are not envisioning it, it's got basically the same objective zones as Moon Shadow, but +1 in the center. They do count as terrain, and in the center, 1 goes away every turn. They are a little further apart because Moon Shadows are 8 inches in, and I believe Chaos Theories are 6 inches.
Yeah. And Chaos Theory is one. It's my favorite because if you know how to like manage the removal of the objective feature, then it like adds an extra layer of depth to the game. But if you're not experienced enough to be able to manage that, then it can get real frustrating. Yeah, it can get real frustrating.
And admittedly, it bit me harder than it bit him, because the objectives that went away, I was the only one with models on those objectives. So like in the first pulse round, I ended up scoring a good number of the objectives. Going second, though, I contested him off of all of them. I did have a squad that went and scored the far left objective for me. And then they strung out to kind of be towards his objective. And one weird thing that happened in this game was they had this terrain piece that they basically had like these 4 legs and like a floor on 2 sides of it with like a stairwell that went up the middle. And my Raker was sitting on the far side of that under it. I literally could not see my Raker. I forgot my Raker even existed. Okay. There was a point in the game, like he's on the other side of the board. He does a kinetic accelerator with a firebrand, and we resolve it. And you know, I'm like thinking we've done everything we need to do, and we're like moving like a turn and a half later. He's like, "Oh, you know what? That Raker should have been in those kinetic accelerators." I was like, "Well, you know, we can. I haven't done anything with him yet. I mean, it doesn't change anything. We can go back and do it." And I even like went over I like leaned over to the table. I'm like, "Oh shit, there is a Raker right there." I was like, I forgot he existed, you know. And I was like, well, you know, we can do is we can either roll it out or I'll pick him up. Like, I was pretty convinced this fully loaded firebrand with you know, doing a kinetic accelerator probably kills the Raker. You know, I was like, we can pick him up, whatever you want to do, we'll do it. I don't care. I mean, he's like, no, I forgot to do it. Well, whatever. So we're playing the game, and so like the objective that I only had models on the far left went away. And then end of pulse round 2, I had just gotten a Marauder on top of that terrain piece to score the middle objective at the end of that turn. And then that one went away. So this Marauder is effectively out of the game from here on out. And sometime in that pulse round, I had another disgusting scything run where a scythe without Cankerbane ended up clipping boss and one-shotting him. And then, so like the final pulse round comes around, and that Raker's seriously, it stopped him from scoring the 1 point he would have gotten. So like that game ended up being 13-0. And I blame that a lot on just end of pulse round scoring and how like silly it is that you can like how, because there were a lot of turns he would end his turn and he would have been scoring like 2 points, right? But because the way the end of pulse round scoring works, one scything run, I can kill you off this point, get to this point, and then I just have to contest that point. And suddenly you're not scoring anything, and I'm the only one that has scoring agency.
Right.
So, I don't know. Anybody who's listened to us for any period of time understands I hate end of pulse. So, I'm sorry, Dan, if I gave you a bad experience in any part of that. But I think you're catching on to the game, and it was a really good game. So then we move on to the final round, because today was also a 3-round event, because we had 7 sign up originally, because the second day at Bokur Brawl was going to be a lower person count day anyways, because most people come to the Bokur Brawl for the team event, right? So I was under no illusions we were going to have, a maxed out War Machine or Warcaster event both days. So we had 7. 1 got a bye. They decided to stay out of the event. So we had a 6-man event the second day. And like I say, it was mostly the same players. My one, Pat, didn't play the second day because he was in the team.
Bye wasn't the same, was it? Like, it wasn't the same dude that got the bye?
No. I think it was a March
Okay.
player.
Good.
The guy from the day before was an ISA player. So this was a wild game. This was on Apotheosis agenda again, because we're at the point where we have to copy some kind of scenario. And Apotheosis agenda, which is what I played this guy on yesterday, the day before, same mission. One thing that happened, though, I forgot to even use the rules for Apotheosis agenda. So I just had my normal hand size the entire time. Like, I even realized it at like the bottom of Pulse Round 3, and I mentioned it to him, and I was like, you know what? I've gone this long with only the 5 cards, and I'm just continuing out. So, this was one of the most insane games of Warcaster I think I've ever played. So Pulse Round 1 happened, and I think I got the role to go first. And stealth yet again was important, because I was able to position my my vassals to where they, the Strike Raptor couldn't shoot them turn 1. So what happens is I go up, I score a point with my Weaver, I score a point with my vassals, and then I pass it over to him, right? So he had positioned really weird, because his Strike Raptor was pretty far away from his engineer. So what he did was on his turn 1, he cortical, like, because he wanted both of them hidden from my Weaver, right? So this is how much people respected the Weaver play. He cortical rampagered the Strike Raptor laterally, so the engineer could tune him up, and then the Strike Raptor came out to do things. Now, critically, the Strike Raptor did not get on any points, and neither did the engineer this whole first pulse round.
Weird.
Yeah. And he focused on killing my gates, which he did very well, because he killed both of my starting gates on my first 2 turns, 100-0'd them. 2 5-art gates he killed with just 1 Strike Raptor activation, and I don't even think he got melee both times. I was so dumbstruck. I was expecting to have like a 2-art gate, and then I'm going to allocate 1 to this. No. So some things that ended up happening this pulse round was like, so I put that Archeronian Benediction, the one that damages models for attacking or for killing vassals. And the next turn, I just moved up my vassal squad, got them all on his point. Now, unfortunately, one thing I didn't do was I didn't do that before I hit him with a Fury, because what happened was I hit him with that Fury, and I did like 2 points of damage, and he did the movement that he can do. That Cortex. What is the Cortex name?
Dogfighter.
Dogfighter. He Dogfighter Cortex onto that point, and I think he also put that stupid card that lets him attack models after he gets hit. So he had Dogfighter Cortex and that card on Vengeance Sequencer. Yeah, he put both of those on the Strike Raptor for Pulse Round 1, and I'm just like, I don't even know what to do. So I just have my squad sitting there looking at a Strike Raptor, sitting there looking at my squad, and neither one of them are happy. So throughout that pulse round, at some point, I did kill his Strike Raptor. I know there was a point where his engineer was within walking range to one of his objectives. And instead of hitting his Strike Raptor with like either Annihilation Vortex or Velocity, I ended up hitting his engineer because I was like, listen, I don't want you scoring this. I just don't want you to have any part of these objectives. So before the end of that pulse round, it was wild because there were, like I say, first turn, second turn. He killed 2 of my gates, 100-0, 5 art gates, didn't kill my Weaver, didn't kill my vassals, killed both those gates. And yeah, I still can't even believe it. Like, it would have been like 3 shots from one Strike Raptor to kill those 2 gates. And he did it. I'm dumbstruck still. And I don't even, he didn't play Arcane Synthesis the first turn. So this is a Strike Raptor that was on 1 or 0 arc, killing a gate from 100 to full with 3 shots. That was his dice throughout most of the game. Like anytime he would hit me by 1 with a POW 3 on like an armor 4 thing, it always did damage. But because of the way that things worked out, I did end up scoring all 4 points on the first pulse round, and he only and the one he scored was just because like on like his final turn he summoned a Fiddles, ended up just flying it over to like one of my points, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, oh yeah, one thing that happened during that pulse round was I got his Strike Raptor down to 3 health, right? And then I triggered a Vengeance Sequencer on it, and we had seriously talked like the turn before about how my vassals have that Archeronian Benediction on them, right? We just brought it up because we had just brought up how he has Vengeance Sequencer, I have this, and he has the Dogfighter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's on 1 health, and he shoots my vassals, and he kills like 2, but then his Strike Raptor just died. So it was a really weird interaction. He killed his own Strike Raptor with a Vengeance Sequencer. So Pulse Round 2 happens, and we're just like, I'm doing everything I can for points, but then like Artemis just kills a million things. Like he summons more Strike Raptors. He just kills more things. I don't know what I could not get anything done. Both games I played against him, he did not let the sides do much of anything. And like this game, I think he killed like 3 or 4 sides. Like every time they came out, they just died. It was another. He didn't summon his infiltrators until very late this game. So thank God. I but like I was shooting like that first pulse round. I ended up getting like 4 7-Arc Furies out at it because I got all of them pretty quickly. Like that engineer didn't die to a 7-Arc Fury. I was like, what the hell is going on? I think that engineer lived the entire game. But I could not kill his engineers. I could not kill his hunters either. There was a point in that game where I needed to kill a hunter to score. Could not kill his hunter. I don't know. I had the hardest time killing like anything. Like anything. But you know me, you know how I play. I play just purely for the objectives. And anytime he gave me any chance at an objective, I took it and I got it. Right? So Pulse Round 2, he ended up scoring back up 2 of those points, so I only led by 1. Right? And like I say, he was killing me. So Pulse Round 3, we get to a point where as long as I can score even with him, I win the game. Okay? So it got to the point at the end of Pulse Round 3, I had scored 3 points, he had scored 2. He had no solos that could get on points that he hadn't already scored. And I had a Marauder sitting on a point that he could score. Everything else was either out of range or he'd already scored it. Now, I did not realize that he had an Arcane Synthesis in his hand, and he could have done it on a Duskwolf. But he saw me put, like, I might have baited him into a worse play. I don't think it was a bad play by any means, but a worse play, because I put a lot of emphasis on killing on trying to kill Fiddles, and I got Fiddles down to 1, and I failed to kill him. Because the Fiddles was really close. Like, Fiddles was 3.5 inches away from a board edge, which was also very sad. because I could have velocity projected him off the board if he wasn't. And then he already had 1 point of damage, and then I ended up getting him corroded at some point and did 2 more points of damage throughout that whole turn. And so Fiddles, all he had to do was kill this one Marauder. Kevin wins the game. I didn't realize that he also had because Arcane Synthesis kind of there was a fighter Duskwolf that was like just outside of walking range with one arc to my Marauder. But with Arcane Synthesis, that would have made him in range. Like, I didn't realize that he had an Arcane Synthesis play on that. And I actually I didn't even realize that fighter Duskwolf existed because he had 2 mantlets around it, and it was under this like bridge thing that they had. So I kind of had like blocked it out of my mind for the most part. And if he didn't have Arcane Synthesis, I felt like it was a worse play anyways. Right? Because like if he's having to spike to get there with 5 attacks from a fighter Duskwolf, I don't think that's as good as 1 Fiddles with an arc. My math may be wrong on that, but I think Fiddles is better just because he's got the higher rats. Anyways, so it was wild. It was absolutely wild. He also he had a solo that could have put a pistol shot. It was a Weaver. He could have put a pistol shot into the Marauder first thing of the turn. He didn't do that. He just went straight into Fiddles, right? He goes over to this Marauder, and I don't know how, but he failed to kill him. Meanwhile, that Marauder living or dying was the game. Like, his solos couldn't make it to anywhere. It was, my jaw hit the floor. I could not believe it. I had already just like lost the game in my head. It was wild. I think, to be fair, the situation also happened because a Marauder failed to kill a Hunter earlier, which, I mean, I'm so used to Hunters just falling over dead anytime I look at them. His Hunters could not die. And I did some math on some of these. The Marauder failing to kill the Hunter was a 57. I had a 57% chance to kill it. Fiddles failing to kill my Marauder, he had an 83% chance of killing it, and he failed it. And I doing the Arcane Synthesis Duskwolf, it's like a 98% chance. So there is a chance for failure, but it's like it's not going to happen. So yeah, the game got won off of Fiddles failing to do something he had an 83% chance on. So yeah, it was wild. Like, I was just so taken aback at the end of that game. I was like, go ahead and kill me. I had already checked out at that point because all it has, and then when Fiddles failed, I was like, does that mean I win? Because like he didn't, his Weaver couldn't make it, and he had no solos that could make it, and with it being end of activation scoring, it meant that he couldn't score that point anymore. There were no more points he could score, so it finished the game. Now, just because he did roll out his Weaver, the pistol shot would have killed him. He had a Fury that he could have cast. He had a good number of things he could have done that he just didn't. So that game, I feel like I played the best game I could, but I feel like it felt almost like an undeserved win. Because if he'd have even just scored 1 more point in the first pulse round, I don't win that game. The game ended up being like 18-19. So scores 1 more point in the first pulse round. I know he had Fiddles, a Strike Raptor, and more points than my 8 points of models sitting up. So
yeah,
it was wild.
It was one of those situations where it was less you won and more your opponent lost.
Yes, we'll say it like that, I guess. Because honestly, I felt like the first pulse round gave me a chance. With him only scoring 1 to me scoring 4, and him having a better table position, like all 3 of my turns in the first pulse round was a Vassal Squad and a Weaver. That was all 3 of my first turns. Because he killed both my first 2 gates, and yeah, like for me to have that, like, and score those 4 points, like I needed something on my side there a little bit. It was just a wild game. It was so wild. Like, I just kept picking up models off the board. Like, I would just summon them just to pick them up. It was wild. Like, I just kept having to like put out like 5 art gates the whole game just so I could have like 1 or 2 models left afterward. It was wild.
Sounds like Kickstarter 1 and 2 AC.
Yeah. Kickstarter 3 AC, I feel like he's got an uphill struggle coming for him.
How much did you miss your Talons?
I missed Talons. I miss Divine Tempest. I miss so much stuff. Like playing
Kitty
it's
Cat?
so weird.
What
It's
did
so
you miss
weird.
your
I feel like
Kitty
I'm
Cat?
playing past Warcaster because on the TTS groups, we're in the future. Like we're already using all the Kickstarter 3 stuff, right? Like, and I maybe should have practiced a couple games without my Nemesis and without some of these other things, because like I was definitely not used to running a Vassal squad as like my main go-to for turn 1, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done that in my history of work. So it was definitely a very strange experience. It was definitely strange also that I actually ended up liking them a lot throughout the tournament. Because there were a lot of situations where like I would have Archeronian Benediction on them and people wouldn't want to attack them. Like they would refuse to attack them.
It's a gross card.
It is a gross card. So yeah, it was wild. It was actually one cute thing is with Fiddles being his Fiddles was equipped with like the strafe gun that they come base with and the particle cannon. One of the funny things is if he had killed the Marauder with the wrong weapon, he could have potentially killed his own Fiddles. And because he parked like right next to me too.
Mm-hmm.
He could have potentially killed his own Fiddles. And that would have just been like the ultimate like just what the fuck happened this game? Because at that point he would have been armor 4 to a 4 blast. Like it's not likely, but it's still not. It's still like a 25% chance. So it's not like it's unlikely either.
I think it's higher than 25.
Really, to get a 4 on 4 dice? I don't know the exact odds on that.
Yeah. So I mean, like 1 super strike makes that super likely, right?
It makes it likely. I don't know about super likely, but yeah. It was a wild event. I had a lot of fun. Made me think harder about a lot of games than I've had to in a while. It was definitely weird not playing with a heavy when everybody else had a heavy. Like, because everybody else in every game had a heavy, right? Like, nobody else was running without one. I think I was the only one in the whole event that didn't have a heavy.
Yeah, I mean,
and mine was mostly because I didn't want to fly with it. So yeah, it was very interesting. So some overall thoughts of the event. So the pairing thing my expectations for the event were not perfect. I did not expect the event to run without a hitch. Actually, one weird thing that was first day, Privateer Press putting Skirmish on a 30x30 mat is problematic for some event organizers because they don't have 30x30 mats. Like nobody has a 30x30 mat. So day 1, I come in there and it's just like the terrain is just in the center of a 4x4 mat.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I asked Steve about it. I was like, hey, do you guys have like some tape? We could just tape off the 30x30. You know, like something, because the board edge actually matters a lot in Warcasters because the way of slamming off people off the board could happen.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, you know what? That's a good idea, and I'll have that for tomorrow, but we just don't have any tape here today. So day 1, board edges were undefined. We just kind of measured 9 inches off of the edge of it and called it a day, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine, right? Like this is one of the first, like I say, it was 2 guys running 4 events at the same time, setting up all those tables, doing all the things. Like there is no judgment here. And day 2, you know what? Those guys I don't know how late those guys were there, but they were there super late or they came back super early. Those tables were taped off for day 2. So hats off to them for doing that.
Nice.
Then there was like a whole thing with the PG Swiss thing where the matchups ended up awkward. And I mean, that's just computer things. It happens. Mm-hmm. Somehow that guy apparently was still in on round 3 too. It was wild. But I think they did a great job just running the event and just making sure everything went smooth. And they when they weren't sure about something, they asked me, and if anybody asked, I could show them where any of those things were in the rule book at any time. So it was good. Skirmish missions. We played on all of the skirmish missions except for the teleporty one. And I still think that Privateer Press's decision to go to end of activation scoring both makes for a more interesting and dynamic game. And it kind of cuts out on a lot of feel bads that some of the end of pulse rounds scoring missions can have. So, yeah, I don't know if other people, I think I did actually overhear somebody saying they preferred the end of pulse round scoring missions. And more power to them, to each their own. Everybody's a little bit different. I cannot stand those missions. I hate those. The very fiber of my being.
I love Chaos Theory, but that's for
I am okay with
reasons.
Chaos Theory. I do not love it. I do not like it. If I have to play it, I'm not upset to play it. I still want to go second. Like
I hate spontaneous combustion because it's so swingy. Like especially like with the second player advantage, and since things don't escalate, if you pop off and you get 6 points in pulse round 1, you might as well concede. Like there's just no coming back, right?
Right. Well, I mean, and that's kind of my experience that I had when I played that game too, because there was a point in one of the games I physically could not lose.
Yeah. That happens all the time in spontaneous combustion. By the end of pulse round 2, I don't think I've ever had a spontaneous combustion go the full 3 pulse rounds, because it's just mathematically impossible at a certain point.
I think I've tapped out on that mission more than most.
Oh, Josh, you're always tapping out.
Well, that was kind of rude to call me on.
Oh, listen, Sneaky. Just because you never get to see Pulse Round 3 because you've crushed spirits that early.
Yeah, like maybe if you weren't playing Empyreans, whatever.
It is very. Yeah, that's a very.
I think Sneaky's maybe seen like 3 Pulse Round 3s that were actually still games.
Ever.
In the last year? Yeah.
In the last year, so yeah.
Yeah, that's accurate.
The clock, I think that the hour-long clock is cushy, but there were people that clocked out. I know in my first game of day 2, Philip actually did clock out. I still had like 16 minutes on my clock, and we had like a turn and a half to go. So I was like, hey, if you just want to play this out, we'll play it out on my clock. I don't care. So we played it out on my clock. I understand that a lot of these people haven't had the reps that I've had, and if I had played clock on my first 10 games of Warcaster, I would have been clocking out all the time too. I know I've had Sneaky in games early on where if I'd have put him on the clock from deployment, he'd have lost 15 minutes there.
I was about to say, I'd be clocked out of deployment in the first couple minutes.
Yeah, like me and Sneaky have had some very, very long early games because
when I first started playing,
I'm gonna go get a drink and make dinner and do some things. You're gonna deploy, right? Yep.
Listen,
okay.
When I first ran into the terrifying weavers, it took a minute to to get used
Sneaky,
to them. Okay?
Nobody took very long to deploy against me at all, and none of them even gave me a chance at the weaver.
Listen, I'm talking about
like I say, from what I understand, a few people did clock. I think that in the future, Skirmish can probably go to a 45-minute clock, and I think you would have to get a lot more refined to go down from there.
Yeah, I think
that seem fair to you, Sneaky, or?
Yeah, I think 45 is comfortable, and I think pushing past that it starts getting real uncomfortable. Just because there's so much that goes into like each turn. Like there's so many different things that you have to do, and even deployment by itself, like that's a minute or
I've
two.
never seen anybody else take as long a deployment as you do. You're the only one I've ever seen.
No. Like, I'm not talking about initial deployment. I'm talking about like your void gates every sintle turn.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like it's just another step that just takes a while, and everything else it adds up to where you can only go so fast, right?
Yeah.
But once
I completely agree.
Yeah, like once you get experience in the analysis paralysis isn't such a big deal. That's where that extra 15 minutes comes in.
Yeah, and like I say, I think at best in Skirmish, if they wanted to make like hard clocks to deal with, it would be like 40 minutes. I don't think you could actually give people a real game and go much below that. But I also think that people would also have to be getting more games in. You know, like I think this game kind of started off playing like with shoelaces tied together. Well, you know, with COVID popping up just as the Kickstarter is starting. So like a lot of people didn't get all these games in. A lot of game stores have been struggling. People haven't been finding metas. Like you say, I don't think there was another player at this tournament, and I could be wrong, and I apologize if I am, that had more than 20 games. Although I will say for being less than 20 games, they were a lot better at it than I was for 20. Because like I say, like they knew their rules, they did their thing, they were very on it for the most part. Like I don't
listen to Through the Void Gate.
I don't think very many of them listen to us either. But,
probably not.
Give us way too much credit, sir.
I know at least all the people I played against were.
That's true.
They seemed very proficient.
Got a rep.
They just needed some of that like finer tuning that comes with playing longer, right? Like doing things like cycling out your hand as fast as you possibly can, so you can get to the cards that are actually going to help you win the game, or placing models off of gates to where or even deployment where you can get on a point if you need to. Like don't put them out somewhere where they're going to die, but put them to where they could stay scenario relevant. Like there just some of these like little like refinements that you see as people play more. They were kind of missing some of those, but otherwise, like their mechanics I was impressed. I was actually super impressed. Because I know my mechanics were not that good when I started.
Yeah. Also, just to defend myself, Warcaster is my first war game, so when I first started playing, I was a
15-minute deployment
noob. Complete noob.
Listen.
You made all the maps too. You could have made it where this wasn't a problem.
Did I? Well, when we first started? Yeah, I guess maybe. I don't remember.
But yeah, I'm just giving you a hard time. Like trust me, I understand. Because like my first 2 games, I even tried to make it as hard as I could for my opponents. Right? Like I started off with Squad in the middle, Weaver on the sides. I was like, I'm wanting to get a first turn Fury. I want it so bad, and nobody let me have it. The whole 2 tournaments, nobody let me have it.
Good.
I'll
credit the Bokur guys for having solid terrain set up to where that was
between
good.
Terrain and just the people being aware of it and knowing how to counter it, they did a very good job. The pairings, I mentioned the pairing faux pas that happened, and I mentioned that I did face the same 3 people in the same order both days. It was awkward, but I think part of that is PG Swiss. I don't know exactly how the process runs in PG Swiss, and I also recognize that we were a smaller group of people, right? Like, there's only 5 other people I could have played, so I only missed out on playing 2 different people on the second day, right? So, there is that. So I don't blame anybody for that. I think it's a little sad that I need to play with all the people.
Yeah, especially when there's so few people. Like you'd hope you'd be able to get to play with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, but like I say, there's no matter what in day 2, with there only being a 6-man tournament, I was going to replay somebody.
Right. So
it happens. It is what it is. That isn't on anybody really. It's just like one of those weird things that I just wanted to bring up because it does bring like a weird feeling after a tournament, right? The tables, I felt the tables were pretty good. Personally, I wish one thing that didn't come up was the overhang thing. If anybody knows me also, they know I've been very adamant about how overhang is dealt with in the game. It didn't come up because pretty much all the buildings had lips all the way around them. And most of the time, in my games at least, the buildings were not where the objectives were. So like there was very little reason to deal with the places where you could knock people off or do weird things on.
Mm-hmm.
So, there is that also. The terrain was just, I don't know how much I like Infinity Terrain. I feel like it's those weird side ladders or side steps are weird. And some of the rooftops are very small.
Yeah, it depends on the terrain. Like the newer Infinity stuff with the side ladders, I don't think is good for Warcaster. But the older stuff, especially the paper stuff, that's what I use for a lot of our TTS stuff. And it's what I have personally. So
it's interesting. I felt like the terrain was pretty good. I feel like it was fairly impactful. There were some really cool terrain elements. Like one had like this catwalk that pretty much ran like the length of the board, but it was like 2 inches wide and there were no objectives on it, so it didn't get used. Like the part that got used on it was its legs to try and get covered, which is kind of sad.
Mm-hmm.
There were actually some really cool terrain elements. I felt like the terrain was pretty well spaced on the board. One thing I am going to say is in my future games, I don't know if I'm ever going to use like stilted buildings again. And by that I mean just buildings where you've got a surface on top you can stand on, and then just legs so you can actually walk under the building too. Because in a 3D game environment, it's so hard to like see if you've got a model on the other side. Like even when we were picking up models at the end of the day, I left a model underneath one of those buildings. Like I literally could not see under those buildings, and then there was a point where we were trying to do some pretty precise measurement because one of the objectives happened to be under one of those buildings, and there were two of them on the games I played, and one on two different maps. And I was like, listen, I'm just going to mark where the corners of this building are. I'm going to pick it up so I can actually measure this, because this is freaking impossible trying to move this scourge under here. Because like the back weapons are like hitting the building. And it was,
that's the other thing is like technically a lot of stuff probably shouldn't even fit underneath buildings because your volume is 2.75 inches tall for a warjack, which is generally taller than the actual model is. And so, like, that adds a whole nother, like, dynamic.
Yeah. I don't know. It was awkward. But the terrain itself was good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say the terrain was bad or anything. Like, they had good line of sight blocking for the most part. There was a good amount of cover on the boards. There was a lot of cool angles you could play on different things, and like, I felt like there was enough terrain to be impactful, but not so much that I didn't feel like I couldn't play my scythe, which was important to me. Because I think I was the only non-character vehicle in the whole thing, and I just kept having to resummon the scythe all the time because that thing dies like crazy. I swear there was one game where I lost it 3 or 4 times.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and like three of those times, like... I think I summoned it 4. I lost it 3, and 3 of those times it didn't even get to activate.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially when it's like your like single biggest hitting model. Like it's gonna get targeted.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Just some comments about the player base. Like I say, I kind of touched on this before. Like I felt like all of them, their mechanics were extremely good, especially for all being sub 20 games. Like I didn't talk to anybody that, if there was somebody more than 20 games, I'm not aware of them. They all had really good mechanics. They all seemed to know the rules pretty well. It was just some of those like finer points, like the continuous system failure and can the factotum target itself and stuff like that. Some of those nitty gritty kinds of things that, I mean, of course we asked those early on, like we were in those same shoes when we started. But they all did really well. Actually, here's some weird things I didn't see throughout the game. I don't think I saw an engineer take an activation token off of anything. Weird. I don't think I saw an ISA Weaver take arc off of anything. I'm not even sure I saw an ISA Weaver put arc. No, I think I did see him put arc on there a couple. But yeah, I think that those I was also surprised I don't think I saw a Firebrand get to slam anything with their shield. And the sheer number of times that I did not make attacks that I could have because they would be against Firebrands is just absurd. I'm telling everybody, I think Firebrand is one of the most insanely good jacks out there, just because he puts a lot of decision points on your opponent's turn.
Firebrand's so good, so good.
Speaking of that, some underrated models and rules for me going into the tournament. First of all, I think I completely blacklisted Vassals going in, but I would say they were borderline my MVPs throughout the tournament, mostly the Raker. Just because of the weird kind of things that he could do working with squad movement. He was an absolute all-star. There was a turn somewhere where he didn't die when he probably should have. That was also good. But defense 4 with armor 4 and 2 boxes will do that. That squad was just money. Speaking of them, stealth was actually relevant a couple times, or at least relevant on like the first turn. So like I could have a squad out there that wasn't going to get targeted or touched or messed with. So that was nice. That was just convenient. That first game with the mantlet gave me a whole new lease on life on mantlets. Makes me want to own a few more. The mantlet on that game was just insane, and that mantlet warped the game by itself.
I've actually seen some paint jobs on some of the AC mantlets that actually make them look really cool.
I personally love the way the AC mantlet looks now that I've painted mine. But, like I say, mantlets in the game have always been like, you know how people say those like double-edged swords?
Mm-hmm.
Mine has only had one edge usually, and it's been towards me. So
you got the Rurouni Kenshin reverse blade over here.
Yeah, I'm swinging my sword all wrong. Okay, and that was the one game where that mantlet was actually like super amazing. And then another model that showed up in the finals both times was the Hunter, and just the fact that guy lived both times, and he scored points every time, and he let him make gates out in weird places every time. He was actually kind of a weird all-star. Like he was really good for that guy, and I've never seen Hunters perform that well. So those are my thoughts on the Bokur Brawl. That's all that happened. Any more questions from you guys?
No. Did you like do anything post tournament?
Not really. Like the rest of the people I came with were all playing War Machine. We did try and get a full size game in late night on the first night, but we got through like one pulse round, and then they were talking about closing the hall because it was like 9:30 or something. It's like we came back after we got dinner, and so we just called it. It was against Pat, and he would have whooped my ass, just for clarity.
What were your best and worst moments of the event? Like, give me one of each.
Worst moment, probably Scythe in round 3 of day 1, just like not doing anything. I gave him every chance to succeed, and he fumbled every time. He was awful. It was so awful. Like, that's Scythe.
Forgot to turn the drill on.
Apparently, he just. You would think it would even hurt infiltrators if I didn't have the drill on, though, right? Like, could not kill infiltrators. Could not.
For anyone that doesn't know, Justin's done this awesome conversion for his scythe where it's got a drill on the front instead of a scything blade on the side. It's really cool.
And my drills actually can turn. So that's like one of my favorite parts about the whole. Best moments? I don't know. There were a couple. I know I felt like, I was the smartest man alive when I scored like 3 points on turn 1 in one of my games. Like I felt like I had like figured out the matrix. There was, I don't know if I want to say it's my best moment, but like just that Marauder living through Fiddle when I had just given him up for dead, given up the game, given up the tournament, and him like living. It's definitely a moment I won't forget.
Those moments do always feel good when something's supposed to be dead and it just guts it out. You're like, yes.
like I say, I sat down. My jaw was on the floor. I could not believe it. Like, I'm not going to say that was my best moment because I should have never been in that position in the first place where I needed that Marauder to survive against the odds to win. But it was definitely a moment I won't. Let's put it that way. So yeah,
Nice.
that's the Bokur Brawl experience right there.
Yeah. I was trying to check and see what the Warfare Weekend situation is going to look like coming up this week, but there's, according to them, there's still only 3 attendees. But I know more. I know more people have said they're planning on going. So I don't know.
I haven't checked on it in a while. I actually even closed that tab. I was like, well, doesn't look like there's going to be a big turnout.
Yeah.
And I mean, Warfare Weekend's like next weekend?
Yeah, it's this upcoming weekend. So, depending on how Josh goes, this may or may not be out by then.
Oh, that was a strange call out. But
Josh, you've been really good recently. Don't let Sneaky get to you.
This is the guy that messages me 23 times to get episodes out.
That's Justin.
To get what?
I was talking about you. This
podcast.
I'm
the naggy.
You're like, you're doing really good. I just have to message you 25 times.
I'm the naggy podcast wife.
You sure are, buddy. You sure are.
I'm like, Josh, gotten that episode out? I don't see it on my podcast app.
You're lucky you're cute.
Josh, why is half the episode missing?
Josh, I got to 13 minutes and I don't hear anything.
Okay, next. just for everyone out there, that's a little taste of what I have to put up with. So.
See, that's only a little taste because you're not experiencing all the love that he sees behind the scenes.
Yeah, so much love that I'm unsure exists.
So why don't we talk about as long as we're talking about TTVG, let's talk about Through the Void Gate, what our plans are for the future. So recently, some developments have happened in the community. The Warcaster Neo-Mechanika Discord, the main one, it is actually being taken down at the end of this month. So actually, it's 12/25/11/1. It should be coming down sometime today. They're closing it because they want to be able to. The line of sight crew, I guess the people that actually run it, are wanting to moderate it more closely, and they're wanting to put it on their line of sight Discord. There was a little bit of drama going on with that. They banned a couple people from the server. There was some bad blood in different places. There's been a new Warcaster, like Guerrilla Warcaster server made up. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff going on there. So, there was some rulings on there and weird things that aren't like on anywhere else for anybody to find them. There's just a lot of weird stuff going on the server. I know I personally have just preemptively left the server. And I have not joined the line of sight server personally. Any of you guys on the line of sight server?
Nope.
No.
I didn't enjoy the fact that we didn't get a say in it getting taken down. It's just like, yeah, this is getting taken down. Join the other one or get bent. So I was like, you know what? I don't do ultimatums. I don't I'm hardly on there anyway. You guys had to ping me for me to answer people. So I was like, you know what? I'm not really interested.
Yeah, I mean, you don't interact with Discord anyways, so that's not really surprising.
It was just my out.
Yeah. It's like I have an excuse.
Yeah, I'm also like a big big decisions like that should be decided by the community, not like a small faction of people, be them mods or not. Like, if people aren't enjoying the community, then say, hey, like we opened up a Discord on our line of sight thing. You guys can like come here. It'll be a bit like tighter moderated or whatever, and just let the other one be the Wild West,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think
that's basically what prompted the whole thing. Was a lot of people were reaching out to the to the moderators about, you know, the community being, I'll just say toxic, 'cause I don't know a better word to use, but they just weren't enjoying the community anymore. And I know I had stopped using the Discord because it had gotten ridiculous, and also I had gotten burnt out. And then they did reach out to some people, like they reached out to me and be like, "Do you think this is a good idea?" And at one point, it got bad enough to where I was like, "Listen, y'all do whatever y'all need to do for the community," because it was obnoxious. Like it truly was.
I think it was a couple voices that were obnoxious. I don't think
Yeah.
it was the community as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the problem kind of originated in that they, from the inception of that server up until about a month ago, there almost was no moderation. It was kind of like its own little primordial soup, just let to see what grows out of it. You know, like.
Yeah, I agree, and that's basically why they wanted to bring it onto the line of sight stuff, because they just weren't giving it the attention that it needed. Which is also like, with the whole, drama with various things that happened. Suddenly the moderators like came out of the woodwork, and that was one of the things that like gave me sort of a bad taste, and one of the reasons why I haven't joined the line of sight Discord. I actually left it because I had joined it for the Brawl Machine thing, but I was like,
I kind of did the same thing. I kind of left it as well. I had been in there for Brawl Machine. I'd actually been in there for a very long time. So
yeah,
it did put a bad taste in my mouth. Just like
and it wasn't just the line of sight guys. I think I want to give them credit. They put in a lot of work, building all the various PP communities. It was largely how PP themselves handled the situation that kind of turned me off. And yeah.
I want to clarify. It wasn't so much like the line of sight guys. Like I talked directly to some of them, and they handled it fine. But yeah, there was some other stuff that happened that I was like, eh.
Right, and I don't want to call out any names or anything, but there were some interactions there that didn't leave me feeling great about some things. So, I did end up joining the like the Guerrilla Warcaster server.
You rebel.
And I feel like it's a really sad thing because this has kind of fractured the community. And it's a community that I know I personally have put a lot of time into trying to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I put a lot of time and effort into trying to grow this community, and then just to have like somebody come out of nowhere and be like, "Oh, well, I guess your server's going away. Bye." It felt a little rough, and yeah.
Yeah,
so,
I knew. Hopefully it's good for the community in the long run, but yeah,
it's going to be a setback for sure. But,
yeah, I mean, we'll see. Yeah, it's definitely a setback. We'll see about because the community wasn't that big in the first place. There wasn't that many active people, and hopefully now that game stores are opening back up and things aren't as crazy, then the game can grow a little bit more, and then now people have another place to go, and if they're already involved in privateer press stuff, then they're probably, and they use Discord, they're probably already on the line of sight Discord, and so it just makes it more convenient. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
And some of the things going on that server were people very upset about the new rulebook, and just some other issues that came up. Like there was a ruling on overhang that happened, and that was kind of why I brought that up before. It just made for a lot of weird feels in the Discord. So
yeah,
that's why I personally have left the Discord.
I just want to address this ruling on Discord thing because that one specifically bothered me. I don't believe that Discord should be a place where rulings should be like made official. There should be a web page, a forum, something where you're talking directly to the people that make the rulings and they put the rulings there. Rulings just popping up in general chat in Discord for lack of a better word, I think is kind of BS. Like, then a select few that are on that day or see it on Discord know, but the rest of the community is left out. Yeah. And considering how long we had been asking that question, it seemed a little weird for that to be the place that happens.
Yeah. Well, that's not, people were asking questions, and then a dev came in and answered the question, which I think if
But we had been asking that question since the game started, is my issue. So why choose that day to make a ruling on Discord of all places? Like,
cool. So I'll walk through it, right? So I'm going to say a dev coming in and answering community questions is never a bad thing, right? I'll jump in straight with that, and the place to go is the wiki, so it just needs to be updated. The issue
that this hasn't even been updated on there, because I have been refreshing that.
Yeah, so like the reason it became such a big issue was because they came out with the new rulebook. And the new rulebook was supposed to, be cleaner, address, a lot of questions and stuff like that. And the rulebook was messy. We'll leave it at that.
It didn't meet expectations.
Yes.
You guys are being so nice here. I will just withdraw myself. This one's all you guys.
Yeah, and so the reason the overhang thing became the point of contention is because they changed the wording without actually which actually had no clarifying effect whatsoever, and so people were still having questions. And this is a ruling that people had been having questions about for a long time. And so people were like, well, it's still vague. So, how should we handle this since it hasn't been addressed yet? And so then, the day that the rulebook got released, a dev came in and made a ruling. And so then people were just like, well, if you have a hard and fast ruling and you know what the rule is supposed to be, then why wasn't it in the rulebook? And so then that's kind of what had people upset. And then it devolved much further than it should have, and it caused some issues. But that was basically where the frustration and everything started was, if you have a brand new rule book that was supposed to clarify things, you have a hard and fast dev ruling on how this is supposed to be handled, but it's not clear in the rule book. And so that was where people were upset about.
Well, there's also just the if you look into the past on this particular ruling, right?
It's been 15 different ways, yeah.
Right. The problem is this has been ruled multiple different ways. The dev that came in with a ruling this time, right? He had ruled that way before. But then it got asked to multiple employees, including Souls, and none of them echoed that ruling. And so that's why in the TTS leagues, we've been playing for the greater part of since the game started with overhang.
That's also why I think there should be one solid place for questions to be answered. Like, even if people are asking questions on Discord or whatever, until it's like put in concrete in that forum or whatever, there shouldn't be an answer given. And then it should just be like, every month or whatever, someone should say like, hey, new rulings went up on the forum, go check it out.
Yeah, it's a little awkward because this is like overhang in particular is one of the things that has been very vague, and we've asked for clarification on it from the beginning. This dev gave this tripwire ruling is what I've been calling it very early on. Then Souls himself said, hey, there's no hard and fast way to play it however you want, basically. And so there basically there's no ruling on how to deal with overhang. It was just whatever you and your opponent agreed on. And so like when we would always when Sneaky would run the TTS leagues, I don't want to take any of the thunder. I don't do anything for those.
I was like, yeah, don't take that man's work away.
He had a TO ruling, and one thing that we've always said is TOs, when they run events, they need to come up with a ruling on overhang and on how objectives as terrain need to be treated. Because those are two contentious things because the rules aren't clear on them. And, it always burns me when the words don't change in a way that reflects what you're trying to accomplish with your rules. I think it was like one word change, and it was like just like an adverb or something. Like it wasn't like it was like a very slight change. I don't even know why they changed it or what they changed it. But and then for that to fundamentally change the way that people have been playing the game, sort of like it's out of the bag. We were we're printed in the new Forecaster rulebook. We were play testers in the Kickstarter 3. They didn't tell us that they didn't want overhang in the game, so we play tested Kickstarter 3 with overhang. But if that's not the way the game is supposed to be played, then technically part of our playtesting experience is wrong. And I know I always strive to play games right. Like I may not agree with the rule, but if that's the way it's ruled, that's the way the rules read in the rule book, I want to play it that way because I don't want to get somewhere and then find out I've been playing it wrong.
I'm the same way. I don't house rule anything unless it's like super unclear because I want to play rules as written.
Right. Yeah. And that's,
Yeah. And then that's what we've been saying for a long time, like even particularly with the overhang thing is, even if it's a rule we don't like, which, this is a rule we don't like.
I don't like the tripwire.
We don't care. We just wanted a rule. Like we would figure it out.
And I want it written that way, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it wouldn't even be hard to add like one or two words, to say, hey, this is the way it works.
Yeah.
It was a very frustrating thing, and the situation was not handled well on many sides. Like even I'll admit, for my part, I was fairly rude.
Yes.
I mean, and some guy made a giant post on the Warcaster page. I don't know who he was, but he sounded like kind of a dick. So,
Josh.
Whatever. I hadn't had my coffee in the morning. Okay, that you guys witnessed the result of me not having coffee.
Yeah, I was sitting there trying to play PR for you two assholes.
Usually we're apologizing to people for Sneaky. That day, Sneaky's just making up for everything in one day. He's like, oh man.
He's like, I hate you both.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, in case you guys aren't seeing us some places, that's a lot of what's going on. I know from me personally, I know that I'm kind of taking... One thing that this has taught me is that whereas I like being a community advocate for a game, I don't like being a community advocate where I'm potentially not playing the game right or I'm teaching the game wrong. And this ruling means that I've been playing and teaching the game wrong for a year and a half. And that kind of burns me in a certain weird way. Especially because this is something that we tried so hard to get like a hard and fast ruling on early on. And like even in the Souls Ask Me Anything, that was one of the first questions we launched at him was, how do you treat objectives? How do you treat overhang? Those both came up to him and they were both basically, hey, however you and your opponent rule it. And to find out that now technically, half of the way we've been playing the game is fundamentally wrong because the tripwire ruling does have a lot of implications for how the game is played.
Yeah, it really does. If you're using a lot of 3D terrain and making it relevant, which I do on all of my maps. Buildings are so relevant on all of my maps.
There's even a weird thing because you can voluntarily fall. I can put just the very lip of my base over that building and get extra 2 inches of movement with my heavy warjack. It's a thing. And I understand, the way it was before, you could get an extra inch, right? The way we've been playing it on the TTS League, you could get an extra inch. And I mean, there's, like I said, I also haven't seen that in all honesty. But it opens up the doors for a lot more egregious things, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, while we're talking, while we've mentioned the tokens as the objectives as terrain bit, I was thinking about this the other day, and since we still don't have a hard and fast ruling on that either, tokens are meant to represent something, right? And so even if you're using the tokens, I still don't think you should be able to stand on them because it's representing something. And so it's representing a piece of terrain that provides cover. And there are rules for what pieces of terrain that provide cover are.
One of my rude comments involved this. I was like, at least by your ruling, I'll never see somebody stand on objectives again.
This is true. Yeah, that is true. It does make that more clear because, like, okay, cool, I understand it's a piece of cardboard, it's a token that doesn't quote unquote have any volume, but it's representing something that has a volume. So you just have to agree with your opponent when the game starts. Cool, what type of terrain is this? Is this an obstacle or is this a structure?
So it is whatever. But I know I'm just saying for me, I'm taking a step back. I still love the game. I'm still playing the game, but I'm not going to be the guy in the middle of the community. I don't like that. I feel like I've taught people the game wrong for a very long time now. I don't like the way the situation was handled. I don't like that this Discord that I kind of felt like was like one of my internet homes is just taken away very randomly. There's a lot of feel bads going on. And I'm just taking a step back. Like I say, if somebody ever wants to play a game, shoot me a message. I'm happy to play you. But I'm not going to be that guy that's, going out promoting the game, being in the forefront of all of it, and doing all the things to advance the game.
Yeah.
To bring things back up to a slightly happier note, I'll go next. I haven't been vocal or around as much as I was because life's moved pretty quick for me the last few months. I had my second child in April, and turns out adding the second child to the mix makes things pretty crazy compared to one. So definitely navigating my way through that. And then in the last month, I have had an opportunity come up where I will be owning my own game store. And that has also kept me very busy. So like Justin, I'm going to be around to play games, or if someone wants to ask me a question or something, I will be around and I can get back to people, but I won't be as active as I was because obviously I'm going to be busy working myself to the bone to make this work. So that's fun.
Yay!
Hey, I'm excited for your new venture, Josh.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, that's super exciting.
Like I say, if we can make it work out for you shipping across the border, I'll be happy to buy from you.
Yeah, I'll have to look into the rules for that, but we'll make it happen.
Do you have a name for your new store that you're?
Yes, it is Great Canadian Collectibles.
And are you going to have a website, or are you going to?
Yeah,
I already have a Facebook page.
I have a Facebook page. I have an Instagram. My beautiful wife does TikToks for me because she's a TikTok wizard. And then I do have a website finished already. All I have to do is set up my shopping cart feature and populate my inventory. And then I will both have a brick and mortar location and a website.
That's awesome.
E-commerce.
That's exciting.
Yay. Yeah, it'll allow me to be a stay-at-home dad with said little children, so I'm very excited.
They get to grow up in a game store.
Yeah, how cool is that? I'm gonna be the
sweet.
cool dad.
Yeah. I mean, I basically grew up in a game store. That's all I did every weekend. Yeah. Like, during the week, it was football, and during the weekends, it was be super nerd.
Yeah.
That was basically my childhood.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Yeah.
That was good. That was really good.
I just felt low-key shady, but and I don't know if it was meant that way, but sorry.
My bad. Okay.
That was one of the other things people were upset about with the new rulebook is that there weren't any changes to the more egregious models coming out in Kickstarter 3, and
Imperians.
Well, there also weren't any changes to the models that had changes. Like,
Sure.
There was a Voss errata, there was a Firebrand Shield errata. The Slug Gun still doesn't show that the Strike Raptor can take it, even though it can.
Yeah, so like,
there's a lot of little lazy touches in that book that just burned me.
Yeah, like I said, it was messy. And so that was like where I'm at with things is I had already been a little burnout, and I'd taken a step back from the community and the game, a couple months ago. Partly because of the Discord being annoying, partly because I was just burnt out. Like it got kind of annoying, being like, everyone jokes around about you like crushing people and stuff like that, and it's just not fun when you're just crushing everyone. People joke about me not seeing a pulse round 3 in a year, and it's a true story. And
I was like, that wasn't really a joke.
Yeah, like,
that wasn't a joke. We weren't joking.
Yeah, like it's a true story. It just wasn't fun anymore. Like when you want to be competitive and stuff, and not knocking anybody, but there's just not a lot of people that can put up a fight. And part of that is Empyreans are broken, and I play Empyreans because those are the models I own, right? And those, like,
their aesthetic appealed to you. You liked the rules, like.
Yeah, like
it had nothing to do with them being broken at the time. It just turns out that you twisted them into a horrible monster that causes people pain.
Yeah, like Empyreans are just.
To be fair, I think he would do the same thing with Marcher Worlds. I just think he would.
Marcher Worlds is so boring. It's so boring to play. And like,
you watch your mouth.
it really is boring to play. Like once you've played Empyreans and like have all of the options, or new AC where you've got so many options, like the other factions are just boring. New ISA like has some interesting stuff they can do, and they're fine. But to me,
I think that's true as long as Asa stays alive.
Yeah, to me, well, I think like ISA just has a lot of fun stuff they can do anyways. But I just think Empyreans just do everything ISA does better, and so yeah, there's that. And it just got to the point where like I just wasn't having fun anymore. And like it just when you're playing games and you spend the majority of the game feeling bad for your opponent rather than enjoying the challenge of the game, it's just not a pleasant experience anymore.
And I just want to add that it wasn't for lack of trying on his opponent's parts.
Yeah, like I'm like Empyreans are really good. This is true, but I'm also a very good player, so I'm able to maximize, what I get out of Empyreans. And so, like, even playing like with new AC, like the few games that I played with them, like it was fun, but I was still doing really well, except for when Justin was coaching people.
He was trying to help them overthrow the Overlord.
That is one of the best games of Warcaster that ever got played.
That really was. I'm not mad about that game at all. That was such a good game, and I'm so mad we didn't record it because it was so good.
It showed people what Warcaster is meant to be.
Yeah, like it definitely showed the depth of the game because there was so much that went into that game, and like tiny little decisions that just made such a huge impact. Like if Justin hadn't said, "Hey, you should move the Siegebreaker over there so that, just in case, maybe there's a way for it to get onto that point at some point. It has the opportunity." And guess what? That's what won the game. And like, yeah, and that decision was made in like Pulse Round 2, right? And it's just, yeah. So like that, like those games are like, that's how I want the game to play, and I haven't gotten games like that in a long time. So I just got burnt out, and I just, stepped away. And then the Discord getting weird just kind of turned me off a little bit at the same time. And then I was found a video game to play, stupid Marvel Future Revolution. Don't play that game. It's terrible. Just PSA to anybody thinking about playing that
we're
game.
saving you some time.
Yeah, and money. So yeah. So basically, I'm in a similar spot to Justin. I'm taking a step back. Like, if anybody wants to play a game, definitely feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to do so. I'm not going to be running the TTS leagues anymore. That got stressful and annoying, and it's like the last league, just people just weren't playing, and when we were running the league, like I didn't even want to play, so like, yeah, so I just kind of stopped. So if anybody wants to pick up the TTS leagues and run them, definitely reach out to me. I'll be happy to provide you with all the resources, help you work through how to use Chalong, or if you want to use a different thing, and work up packets. Like, I'm more than happy to help anybody. Or if anybody wants to run like an in-person tournament and wants help making up a packet or whatever, yeah, reach out at Sneaky Buffalo, some number on Discord, or Spencer Harrell on Facebook. 6810 Sneaky Buffalo 6810 on Discord. Yeah, feel free to reach out, but I'm just kind of taking a step back. I'm going to see what happens when the Kickstarter 3 models release, see if they do make any changes, and see what happens with Kickstarter 4, and we're just kind of going to go from there. I mean, I don't imagine there's going to be a whole lot going on until that happens in the Warcaster world. So, yeah.
On that note, we're probably not going to be putting out an episode for some time. I would call this like a hiatus. So just thank you to everyone that has supported us through these 21 episodes. Hopefully things get in a better place and it kind of reignites our fire for the game. And if that happens, I'm sure we'll all be back. Like, we all love the game and love its potential, but when you go that hard for that long, it just sometimes you need a break. So yeah, thank you for all the love and support. We appreciate the community 100%. And we're not saying this is the end. It just might be a while.
Yep.
Do you guys got anything to add?
No, just thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate y'all, and roll super strikes.
Yeah. Easier said than done. Thanks
I mean, for some people.
And we appreciate everybody, and we hope there's reason for us to come back sooner than later.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.